This is part 4 of the Machine Language Manager series. In this video, I'm going to have a few sections on how to use the Machine Language Manager with Astrocade emulation that's included with MAME. As I've shown in previous videos, this is the Machine Language Manager cartridge for the Bally Arcade, Astrocade. This is another picture of the Astrocade, and this picture here, it's from a flyer. This is the white Astrocade. It looks kind of gray in this picture, but it's really quite white. Although, like most of the vintage computers from this time period, they have usually turned like yellowish. This picture is from 1979, as can be seen at the bottom. This computer here, the Bally release, I think was only available from Montgomery Ward. This is a pretty standard setup. You would have the tape recorder, the Bally 300 baud interface. This is Bally Basic, but it's the same setup if you're using the Machine Language Manager. The Machine Language Manager, in case you haven't seen any of the previous videos, is a machine language monitor. It lets you program the Astrocade using opcodes. It's not an assembler, so you do have to hand assemble your programs or type in from an assembly listing. This is the Machine Language Manager manual. I'm going to be typing in one example program under MAME Emulation so that you can see how it is to use the MAME emulator. If you were using this on real hardware, you'd have this 300 baud tape interface. Unfortunately, MAME doesn't support this, but maybe someday it will, and then programs can be saved. This video is going to show you how to use the MLM with MAME. I don't go into explicit detail about how to install MAME, but there is an overview, and if you follow it, you should be able to have no troubles installing MAME, at least on a Windows machine. MAME is also available for Linux and the Macintosh, but I don't have any experience using the emulator on those systems. Unfortunately, this color picture of a white Astrocade with a unreleased full stroke keyboard was never released. This color version is of a picture that appeared in the February 1979 issue of Arcadian on page 29. That is actually from the very first volume, so people were still expecting this to be released. This was like just a few months after the Arcadian started publishing. So this never came out, so you would be stuck programming on this 24 key keypad, which isn't available for the MAME emulator. So there's got to be an alternative, right? Well, I show you how to construct one. After I show you the emulation, I have about a 10-minute piece on how to make your own keypad so that you can easily use a 101 key keyboard for a Windows PC anyway, and apply stickers to it so it can be used with the MLM under MAME. MAME is the only Astrocade emulator available. There isn't one that's developed exclusively for the Astrocade, but that's okay because the MAME emulator for the Astrocade works pretty well. Not only does it work for the Astrocade, but it supports the arcade games based on the Astrocade chipset, and those 6 arcade games are Seawolf 2, released in 1978, Extra Bases, which is a sequel to Tornado Baseball, a 1980 game, and Tornado Baseball was actually ported to the Astrocade, Space Sap, a 1980 game, Wizard of War, released in 1980, Gorf, released in 81, and finally Robbie Roto, released in 1981 as well. Originally, the only emulator for the Astrocade was MESS. Now, MESS stood for Multi-Emulator Super System, and it supports about 1,000 different systems, if you can believe that. MAME stands for the Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator, and it was first released in 1997. MESS became part of MAME in 2015, so sometimes I might refer to MESS, and if I do, it's because I've been calling the Astrocade emulator MESS for so long that it's still kind of hard for me to get it through my head that it's now part of MAME. So to download MAME, which I'm not going to explain in detail how to set up and use, but I'm going to go over it sort of to give you an overview, and if you want to install it and use it, you should be able to get enough information here and using some documentation from the web in order to install MAME. And it's really not that hard. Some people are intimidated by it, but the most difficult parts I'm going to explain here, and that's just finding the ROMs that you need to get it set up. So first, go to mamedev.org and download MAME. MAME is available for Windows, the Macintosh, and Linux. I've only used it for Windows, so if there's any additional details that are required for these other platforms, I'm not sure how they work. I've not used them. The latest release of MAME is probably going to be different than what you see here. The one I have here is only from a few days ago, and this is version 0.200, and MAME is available with the source code or just as a plain binary. There used to be a third version, and that was a debug version, but the debugger has been rolled into MAME. You don't need to download that separately anymore. It's a command line, and you just type in -debug, and the debugger will be active. There was a time when finding documentation for MAME meant going all over the internet in different places and asking in forums how to get it set up, especially if you were trying to use an obscure system like the Astrocade. That isn't really required anymore. Now you can go to mamedev.org, and there's a documentation page there. If you go to /whatis.html, you'll be able to find all the documentation you ever will need for MAME, and it's kept up to date on a regular basis. Once you have MAME downloaded and installed, which, like I said, I'm not going to go over, you'll have it in a separate directory, and into this directory you're going to want to get some ROMs. Where do you get the ROMs? You get the ROMs from Bally Arcade, of course. Where else? They're probably available in other places, but Bally Arcade is a one quick stop to pick them all up in one zip archive. Navigate to the cartridge ROM images, so you'd click on from the main page emulation and then cart images. You will find a link called Astrocade ROM collection. Click on that, save it to your hard drive, and we'll get to those files in a minute. So open up the directory that MAME is now installed in. It's going to be different, so don't bother looking at where it's installed on mine. I have it under my H directory. You'll probably have it under C or D or whatever hard drive you want to set it up. In what folder, what directory. However you do it on your computer, it's going to be a little different than here. So you'll notice here there's a whole bunch of directories, and there's a mame64.exe, which is highlighted. The mame64.exe is the one that I'm using because I'm using a 64-bit version of Windows. You might be using a different version, so yours might be called something else. The most important directory in here is called ROMs, and what we're going to do is we're going to install some ROM images to this directory. Into the ROM directory, move the following 4 folders from the files that you downloaded from ballyarcade.com. You're going to want to put the 3 ROM files, which are astrocde.zip, astrocdl.zip, and astrocdw.zip. Technically, you only need to move one of those because each one is a slightly different variation of the Astrocade ROM, but at least one of them. I would recommend using astrocde.zip. That's the one I use the most. And for those to work properly for you, the way I have it set up, you'll want to do that. You also need to move a directory called astrocde into here, and everything in that directory needs to remain zipped. What the heck is this? Well, this is the terrible setup that's going to be the default if you're using the machine language manager with MAME. This is through no fault of the people who created MAME. They made it so it's most useful for people who are just using cartridges that don't have an overlay, and it works pretty good for that. But it does not work very well for either Bally Basic or the Machine Language Manager. So it works great for the numbers 0 through 9, but everything else is all over the keyboard and doesn't work well at all. So we're going to set it up differently so it works better for our needs. Quite a few years ago, I had the same trouble with Bally Basic using it under MAME, and I created these stickers that I put on top of my keyboard and then reassigned all the keypad input for the 101 key keyboard in MAME. So here's what I did. I took these stickers, applied them to a keyboard that I had that was a spare. In fact, it wasn't even spare. I just went to the store and picked up a used keyboard for a few bucks and put these stickers on them. I'm going to talk about how I do that for the MLM a little bit later in this video, and I actually walk you through it in videos. So from ballyarcade.com, you can download stickers that I made for the Machine Language Manager. There's 24 of them. And you'll be printing them out onto sticker paper if you decide to use this, and then applying them to a keyboard. And when you do that, you'll end up with a keyboard that looks like this. It's not going to work automatically with MAME. You'll have to reconfigure it to work with this keyboard set like this, but it's very easy to do. Applying the stickers hardly takes any time either. It probably took me 15 minutes from start to finish, from cutting them out to applying them. And that was with me making a video about it too, so it doesn't take long at all. I recommend you start MAME by double-clicking MAME64. I don't do that. I actually start MAME from the command line, and the reason I do that is because I use it with the debugger. You don't need to use the debugger until you've probably learned how to program in machine language, or you want to try to hack a ROM or something like that. I would say 99% of the users who emulate the Astrocade are never going to want to see the debugger. And if you do see the debugger and use it, you probably won't understand it. But luckily nowadays there's actually some great documentation for the debugger. It's a little hard to get used to, but once you do, it's an invaluable tool. You'll notice that I also use something called no filter, and this makes it so when you're taking screenshots, they look a little better, but most users don't need this. So if you want to use Startup MAME, ignore what you see here and just double click MAME64 and you will get this. This is the MAME emulator setup and already has the Astrocade ROMs put into the ROMs folder. It automatically detects them, and we're going to use the Astrocade one, the first one, Bally Professional Arcade. I'm not sure why they don't call it the Bally Astrocade here, because that's really technically what it would have been called. I'm pretty sure that the Astrocade ROM, which is ASCII, which is in a zip folder, is actually for the 1981 release. After you double click on the Bally Professional Arcade, you'll see this listing of alphabetical order of all the cartridges released for the system, and there were several dozen, a couple of the homebrews, and many prototypes. There's also some cartridges that you can run that were originally basic programs, and they will work just fine because they've been converted to something called basic carts, but it's not an automatic thing. And there's also ROMs that will not work at all because they're not supported properly in MAME, but most will. For those who aren't sure how accurate MAME is, I would say it's really accurate with most cartridges. There are some lacking features, like it doesn't support the 300 baud interface or the 2000 baud interface, but it does support expanded RAM. So you can have up to, I think, 48K of expanded RAM on the system, which is pretty great. It also supports 2 different kinds of expanded RAM. I'm not going to go into that. So just be aware that the MAME emulation, even though the Astrocade is kind of an unknown system, it works pretty good. For our purposes, and since I want to show you how to use the Machine Language Manager, you're going to want to scroll down to Machine Language Manager. You can either scroll down to it, or you can type the beginning of machine and MACH, and it automatically will take you there. It's highlighted, and when you double click on it, you'll see this screen. Well, you'll sort of see this screen. This screen is the what you get on the screen, but there's no white outline when you're emulating the system. I put this here to make it easier so you can see where the overscan area ends. Since this is widescreen, it would look funny without it, I think. The big thing is we need to set up the input for this machine. The input is or all the options actually are accessed by pressing the tab key. You press the tab key, this will come up. This input for this machine will allow you to change a whole bunch of stuff, including the knob settings, the joystick settings, which I'm not going to get into. That would be for the more general user. And maybe I should make a video on how to set up MAME with the Astrocade emulator, because I don't think there really is one, and most people always have questions about it. Maybe more people would use the Astrocade emulator if they knew how to set it up easily. So once you click on input, you'll see this. I've scrolled down a little bit, and here are all 24 of the keys that are set up for the use with the 24 key keypad. This is how it's set up for the Astrocade without a basic overlay. Using the Astrocade emulator is pretty difficult, and you are all over the keyboard and it's hard to use, which is why I designed the keyboard stickers for Bally Basic and the Machine Language Manager. These are the defaults. So here you can see that to get clear or the green key on the basic, you have to press E. Does that make any sense? No. So I've redone that so that it makes more sense with my stickers on top. Here's the setup that I have for my keyboard, and you'll want to set it up the same way if you put your stickers on the same keys. Here's my setup, and when you're done, you're going to want to have it set up like this. This works really well. I mean, I actually prefer using the MAME emulator in the with my keypad overlay that I've made than I do on real hardware. It's easier to type. I mean, that's a great thing. One last thing. After you have your keyboard set up for MAME, you're going to want to use it, and I have a couple examples here. But here's how I created them. MAME actually supports outputting movies, or videos, I guess you could say, and they all get put into a directory called Snap under the MAME directory. And I've made 2 videos in this example that you can look at. The first one is going to have me showing the Machine Language Manager cartridge listed from the 2000 baud hex memory area. And I've already done this before on real hardware, and I'm just doing it here to show you what it looks like under MAME. And that was done in, I think, video number 2 of this 4-part series. The second one is going to show me typing in a program that is in the Machine Language Manual. And that program is the ASCII character that lists all the ASCII characters. But if you're curious, you can actually emulate the Astrocade and just record your games. So this would be a way to do that. You put a slash AV, not a slash, you put a dash AVI right, and then you name the file. And in my case, the machine language video that I create is going to be called MLM_001.avi. It's going to be in a snap directory. Here I list the first 96 bytes of the MLM cartridge. I type in 2000, type the address key, and then I press the read key 16 times, and that is the first 96 bytes of the cartridge. I'm going to use the Astrocade emulator included with MAME to type in a program from the Machine Language Manual. This program is called the ASCII character set program, and it's on page 7-6. It's only 7 lines long, but it's 12 opcodes long when I type it in. This is the Machine Language Manager running under MAME. First I type in the address where the ASCII character set is going to start. Then I start typing in the opcodes. There's going to be 12 of them all together. The first ones are a pair of 3, then a pair of 2, then another pair of 2, and D7 is a print. 3C is an increment A. This final C9 is a return. So that's the whole program. Now I'm going to make sure that I typed it in correctly. So I type in the address, I list it. Yep, it's correct. Now I type in the address where I want to execute it, and I execute the program, and the program worked correctly as expected. That is using the program under MAME. Now you've watched this video and you want to try this Machine Language Manager and you do not have an Astrocade. You don't have the hardware. Obviously, there is an Astrocade emulator available. It was once part of MES, now it's part of MAME, the multi-arcade emulator. And does this fit onto MAME? It does not. So I was explaining earlier that you could make your own version of this if you have the real hardware. But if you don't, there are some alternatives. What can you do? There's a few things you can do. You can't do this. You can't make a substitution of this with this for MAME. But you can make a substitution by doing a couple of other things. Let me show you this. To begin with, this is the overlay for the AstroBasic or Bally Basic. They're the exact same overlays. You can't use this with MAME either, but there are substitutions. The regular layout that's available for MAME and when you're using it is very difficult to use, and it's terrible in fact. But you can redefine the keys, which is a godsend. So from this you can get a 104 key Windows keypad, or if you have an old 101 key keypad laying around, you can take this and you can create your own keypad for use with MAME. What I do is I take these 4 by these 6, so this row, this row, this row, all the way down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So these keys are going to become my Bally Basic keypad, and I'm showing you this as an example because this can also be done for MAME with the Machine Language Manager. This is a close-up of a pretty typical 101 or 104 key keypad. The Astrocade's keypad is 4 across by 6 down. So what I do is I use MAME and I tell it that the Z key is going to be the go, and I reassign all the letters to these. That would be really hard to remember. And I do this for Bally Basic, and I also do this for other versions of software that I use. But we're only caring about Bally Basic here, even though we're talking about the Machine Language Manager, because I'm going to show you an example. So this is what the keyboard looks like before you print out some labels that I've made on Bally Alley. Check it out. These are the labels. Once you take a keyboard and place my labels onto it for Bally Basic, you will get a keypad that's very usable under emulation and MAME for Bally Basic. So you've got your 4 colors here, which are the words keys. I even added some extra labels. In Bally Basic, if a program is executing, you can hold these 2 keys down and you'll get a trace. But basically I just made this in Photoshop, an old version of Photoshop, and I printed it out. I put plastic over the top of them. I printed it on sticker paper, applied it with tweezers. They work perfectly. It works great for the Astrocade and Bally Basic. I know, you're thinking to yourself, is this guy going to get on with it? Is he going to show us anything about the Machine Language Manager? Of course I am. So this is the regular keypad for the Machine Language Manager. You put that on a 24 keypad on the Astrocade and away you go. As I said, there's no way to really simulate that easily with the MAME emulator. Or is there? As I was saying earlier, I was able to make this overlay. Here is a close-up of the labels that I printed today at FedEx office. It cost me 79 cents. I provided my own paper, this is actually sticky paper. It's really stickers. So I'm going to remove these 24 different stickers, and I'm going to put them on top of my keypad. And if you do that yourself, you'll also be able to emulate the Machine Language Manager and use it easily under the MAME emulator. This is my paper cutter. On top of it is my 24 key keypad labels that I'm going to stick to my 101 key, or actually I think it's 104 key USB keyboard, and then I'm going to use it with MAME. So the cool thing about this is that the paper cutter allows me to do it more easily than I would be able to do it with a pair of scissors. But I only have this keypad overlay sitting on top of this X-Acto brand guillotine paper cutter because I have this when I created a pair of releases for the Astrocade called War and Crazy Climber. And you might have seen those, you might have heard of them. I didn't program the games, but I helped get them released, and I made the labels and stuff and stuck them to the cartridges that were released, and this paper cutter made that much easier. So if you print this at home, just please feel free to cut them up with a pair of scissors and stick them to a spare keyboard. I actually bought this keyboard today for just $8 at a used computer store. Of course, you can also use a crappy USB keyboard brand new, and it'll work just as well. I have now already cut the keyboard stickers down to the size that's exactly the outside diameter of the 24 keys together. I'll show you how I do my first cut. There's nothing special here. I'm probably blocking the camera a little bit, but this is the guard which you're never supposed to have your fingers on this side of. Yes, my fingers are on the other side. I don't know how they expect you to use that guard. Be very careful. Don't cut off your finger. And there is my first cut. So now I've got to go through a few more times. But so there's a start right there. These are the 24 keypad stickers. They've now been cut into strips of 4. Each strip contains 6 of the keys, and now I need to cut these down so that there's 24 stickers altogether. I actually skipped a step. I should have taken and put some sort of tape over the top of these stickers to make them more durable. I did that with my overlay for my Bally Basic stickers, and it worked great. So what I'm going to do here is I'll show you what I use. I should have done this from the beginning, but this will still work. I'm just glad I didn't forget until after the 24 keys were done. So I take a piece of packing tape, that's this, nothing special. Put it over there and press it down real good. And this will make it much more durable, and if your hands get sweaty or something or whatever, which is bound to happen if you're typing on a 24 key keypad, then you can not have to worry about the keypads getting stuck or messed up. The trick now is going to be to take the sticker version of this 24 key keypad overlay and put it on top of the 104 key USB keyboard. I will have to do it one by one, so what will happen is the D will become the Z, and then I'll go down and continue all the way to the N, so the N will become the asterisk, and I'll continue from the D, so the D will be the Z, the E will be the A, the F will be the Q, the 1 will be the call, and I'll continue that for all the keys, and I will apply them, and when I'm done I'll have a keypad that is usable under emulation. The trick to applying the stickers to the keyboard is that you have to separate them from the backing, which can be a little difficult. Sometimes you might need to use an X-Acto knife or something. But the real trick is this. Not coming into focus, but it will. The trick is tweezers. So if you use tweezers and apply them, you'll get it right every single time. So just apply them carefully with tweezers for all 24 keys and you will get it. With the stickers applied to the keyboard, this is what the finished product will look like. If you use this with the MAME emulator, you will be able to use your machine language manager with ease. So it's as easy as that. As we fade off into the sunset, and this is the last of the machine language manager video, I'm going to leave you with a few pictures of the Astrocade and its related hardware and software, and give you some final thoughts. If you've made it this far into the videos, you've seen everything I have to offer about the MLM. I've given you an overview on a background, given you an introduction. I showed you some books that you can get to learn how to use the machine language manager, like Programming the Z80 by Rodney Zacks, overview of the Z80 software gourmet guide by Nat Wadsworth, as well as the nutting manual and a Z80 CPU reference guide. In part 2 of the video, I showed you how to use the MLM in pretty good detail. Of course, you need to use the manual in order to understand how to use it fully, but I'm pretty convinced that if you just watch video number 2, you can use the MLM without issues and get a very good, pretty good in-depth understanding of how it works. I also showed you how to interface with the UPI of the Astrocade, one of the easy ways to program the system. That is, if you understand how to program in machine language, which you can learn to do with the MLM cartridge. In part 3, I gave you the example programs, and I showed you all of them that are included with the Machine Language Manager manual, as well as one other that was released only on tape. All of those examples can be used to learn machine language a little bit. If you understand how they work, then you'll understand how to program in machine language a little bit better. In this last video, I showed you how to use the Machine Language Manager with the Astrocade emulator that's included with MAME. I showed you how to set up MAME and how to get it going and use it to show some addresses that are in the Machine Language Manager cartridge. This last part of the video is one of my favorites, actually, where you can set up a full-size keyboard to act as a 24-key keypad that's included on the Astrocade. So that brings us up to date. Where do you go from here? Well, you can start by using the Machine Language Manager with an Astrocade and real hardware, or as I've already shown you, you can now use it under the MAME emulator. If you're very curious about learning how to use the MLM and to learn machine language, maybe you will want to learn how to program your own cartridge, in which case all the resources are available from ballyarcade.com. You'll want to use a cross-assembler like CMAC. From there, maybe you can write your own game. I'd love to see it. I'd love to play it. Have fun with the Z80, and good luck.